Hi everyone, it's Erin Scott here. Happy Scorpio new moon. I'm recording this on the new moon. In fact, we're right about 4 hours from the exact point. And we're going to just take a look at some of the key aspects to this growth process. Of course, any new moon cycle, every month when we have a new moon, we are entering into a new cycle of aligned growth. The inner self, the outer self. What is the activation for the aligned growth of the individual, of the native, and indeed of the collective, because all of us are going through this process. So what we have here is the Scorpio new moon happening today, the 27th of October 2019 at 11:38 p.m. Eastern U.S. time. And we have a couple of very intense dynamics, very positive ones. There's a lot of potential over this next 30-day cycle for a lot of growth. So let's take a look at the prime area. In fact, the thing that we're looking at initially and at a foundational level is the point of the Sun and Moon conjunction, which is at 4 degrees, 25 minutes Scorpio. Well, you can see quite clearly we have an exact opposition to Uranus and Taurus at 4 degrees, 37 minutes. So, and you can see the T-square activated with Varuna, the asteroid. So let's take a look at all of that. First, let's start with the actual point of the new moon. Again, every month when the Sun and Moon become conjunct, it is a natural alignment of inner and outer self, of feeling and mind, or feeling and our ego, the ego persona, how we are emanating ourselves outwardly, how we're feeling within and what we're emanating out. But there is indeed some alignment, and there's an obligation with a new moon to really see the inside, to see what's happening within, to reconcile at some level what's going on within and how we're emanating who we are outside of ourselves, what we're projecting outward, in other words. So at this new moon in Scorpio, which of course we only ever have once a year, this is a deep psychological time, a deep process of internal evaluation and truth-telling when it comes to the wounds of the psyche, the patterns of wounded old past emotional stories. And the interesting thing, everybody, about this Scorpio new moon is that it's happening at a 4-degree point. 4 traditionally is. The number 4 indicates and represents stability, organization, security. There's a level here of stable foundation with a 4. The interesting thing is, as we are looking at this kind of a potential for a new birth of self with stabilized psychological clarity. Stabilized, number 4, understanding of the depth of the dark woundings within. Okay? So this is the process that's underway. And by the way, it's exacerbated by this 16-degree Lilith asteroid as well. So we're going to talk about that. But what we have here, which is quite fascinating, and exacerbating the theme and indeed the potential for the growth within each of us, is this exact opposition to Uranus at 4 degrees Taurus. So let's talk about that. Number 1, it's an exact opposition. So this is speaking very clearly, very distinctly about, first of all, the number 4, stability. Factors of stability. But specifically what we have going on here is internal psychological clarity and restabilization that is confronting issues of changing Uranus stabilization 4. And indeed, with regards to issues of money, possessions, our basic needs, having what we need to live and survive and thrive. Okay? So changing conditions of the stabilization that we've known, perhaps. In those changing conditions, we are somehow perhaps activating some stabilized state. But what is the stabilized state coming from? It's coming from a new psychological reckoning, some sort of ability to see what was previously not able to be seen, confront what in the past maybe one was too fearful to confront. But this is about a new ability to feel stable within the psychological aspect of the person, meaning you. So each of us as individuals are getting to a new place of safety within our own wound sets, within our own psychological instabilities. Okay? Now, with all that being said, we in fact have this T-square, which is dynamic because both of these points are squaring Varuna, the asteroid. And of course, Varuna is a Hindu god. And how I have been reading Varuna, which I've only been doing for the past 10 months or so, is Varuna, as I've understood it in my chart and in my clients' charts, is it shows us where we have natural access to confidence that is without wounding, confidence of skill set, confidence of being that is non-impacted by wounding. It's not diminished by any kind of wounding. Now, that being said, Varuna right now is at 3 degrees in Leo. And of course, Leo ruled by the sun and correlated with the 5th house is all about the individuated self, the confident emanation, the innocent, confident emanation of the fully individuated self. That's Leo. And Varuna in Leo is almost doubly confident. In fact, in some cases, this can look like direct arrogance or over-the-top entitlement. But, and indeed, that is going to be the activation for some, by the way, especially with all we have going on the global stage right now, right? We have the impeachment processes currently at play in the US. We have Brexit activated for this coming week, this week on Halloween. And we have activations going on in Chile. We have a whole lot that's going on that is the kind of pressurized, masculinized, aggressive energy, the entitled energies that are playing themselves out. And that's a bigger story. But what I'm saying is this absolutely can activate, especially with Uranus involved with this opposition to the sun and the moon. This can, for some, especially people that are not willing to look within, that are not willing to confront their own demons, that are not willing to understand that they are both light and dark. All qualities of the whole human experience exist within each of us. There are people who are in full and complete denial mode. And indeed, for those individuals, this Uranus squaring Varuna can look like erratic, entitled action that can be scorpionic in its implication, meaning Pluto-ruled activity. This can be death and dismemberment. We're talking about multiple leaders throughout the world right now that are in that are majorly activated, right? The Middle East, Turkey, Syria. So there's lots activated now, which is bringing forward all kinds of responses. So the interesting thing for all of us is that we are handling this differently according to our own blueprint, according to our own process of evolution, where we're at in our evolutionary journey. For some, this is going to look like intense plutonic, brutal, response to the feeling of instability and indeed the feeling that wealth or finances or the possessions that are held or the things that are under one's jurisdiction are not feeling secure. And because of the square to Varuna, it can look like maybe hyper entitlement and hyper arrogance. So for some, this is going to be explosive. For others of us, this is going to be majorly stabilizing. And indeed, the Varuna T-square here, as the new psychological stability can get activated even in the face of, situations of change when it comes to the possessions we own, when it comes to the money in the bank account, Whatever it is that helps us feel safe, stable, and secure. The roof over our head, the food on the table, all of the basic essential needs met, and indeed moving on beyond the basic essential needs onto abundance. If any of those narratives are threatened, for those that are feeling psychologically stabilized and brave, courageous, indeed, a new moon in Scorpio has that ability to tap an innate courage thread. So this particular T-square for some of us is going to be very empowering because Varuna is feeding this newfound confidence, let's say, is feeding the new stabilized and psychologically intuitively attuned individual, okay? And another thing here, which is very important, is that, Uranus has multiple functions. Uranus always brings forward the function of a trauma signature. Wherever we hold Uranus in our natal chart is where we hold a trauma signature. Where we hold Uranus is also where we seek freedom. And it's where we seek to be free, to be fully individuated and ourselves, but yet detached from any egoic, because keep in mind, Uranus, which rules Aquarius, is opposed Leo, ruled by the sun. Leo needs to be seen and acknowledged, but Aquarius doesn't. It's detached. It's more connected to the collective. So that aspect of Uranus is also here. This is where we hold Uranus is where, because it is a planet with electrical storms all over it all the time, 24/7, it's an electric function within the psyche, right? And so with Uranus, it is electric. It connects us to the deep etheric field, okay? And it connects us inherently to the deep past and the deep future, kind of all aspects of the human experience from the past to the future. Quote unquote, by the way, because it's all simultaneous anyway. But with regards to Uranus, though, connected to the sun and the moon, what this talks about is innovation and intuitive hits, intuitive downloads. And by the way, creative. Venus ruling Taurus in the manifestation archetype. This is about creative impulses, intuitions, and downloads coming forward that are aiding through confident expression. Varuna in Leo is creative and confident expression. So indeed, the new birth of the psychologically adept human has a potential to emerge, at least in one way, shape, or form, over the course of this month ahead. So that is definitely activated. Now we have other activations, but before we go there, I want to show you the Sabian symbology here because it's very profound. So when we look at the sun and the moon at 4 degrees, what we want to look at is between 4 and 5 degrees. Now, this is the Sabian symbol, the keynote, and the explanation by Dane Rudhyar, okay? So this is the point of the sun-moon conjunction, everybody. A massive rocky shore resists the pounding of the sea. The inertia of all institutionalized procedures. You can see down here, the key word, in fact, is stability. Okay, so slows the rise of the land from the vast ocean, but once it is formed, it develops a formidable resistance to change in spite of storms. Likewise, once a culture has experienced its basic symbols and its particular way of thinking, feeling, and acting in concrete institutions, these change very slowly indeed. The individual who came to the great city, which he's referring to another symbol here, soon finds his or her life set by the rhythms of city living, which obliterate vaster life processes and the moving tides of evolution. This is the last of the 5 symbols of the 43rd sequence. We see in it how binding and resistant a communal way of life can become. In this, there is strength and stability, and these are necessary factors in the social life of humans until new horizons beckon. The key word here is stability. Now, what I mentioned here to my members and what I'm going to mention to you in this video for the public channel is that the massive rocky shore resisting the pounding of the sea is so significant. In fact, let's drop this down while we just look at it, okay? The reason why this is so important is because the rocky shore indicates an ability to withstand. And when we're talking about the pounding of the sea, we're talking about the pounding of water, which is emotions. It's always reflective of and symbolic of the emotional body, the emotional system, and emotions as they flow. So the ability to withstand emotional outbursts, emotional interplay, emotional drama, that's what we're talking about here. This new moon is a new seed. It's a time for a new birth. And in this month ahead, there's a potential for each of you to develop a new ability to withstand drama and projection and all kinds of things that are emotionally driven and typically by wound sets, patterns that are encoded in the individual's blueprint. So the point is there's a new strength, and indeed we have that on top of the number 4, okay? Now, importantly, let's take a look at Uranus. So Uranus at 4 degrees, 4 to 5 degrees, because that's what we're looking at, between, when we're looking, for example, at this symbol, this says Scorpio 5 degrees, but what we're looking at here is Scorpio 4 degrees, 1 minute to 5 degrees. That's what we're looking at. So everybody, let's take a look. I'm going to read the other one. I know what it is, and I was just going to tell you about it, but I think what I'm going to do is I am going to read the whole thing out to you to really give you a full picture. Okay, so we're looking here. Taurus, 4 to 5 degrees. This is the point of Uranus directly opposed to the sun and the moon. Importantly, what we have here is a narrative of a widow at an open grave. The keynote, the impermanence of all material and social bonds. Here you have the key phrase, the discard of the past. So the important thing before we read that is, of course, we have this Uranus, which does indicate some sort of chaos process, a shifting and a changing, an inconsistency, a lack of stability when it comes to Taurian manifestations, Taurian value system. The other thing about Uranus and Taurus is that each of us and the collective, the human collective as a whole, is going through an alteration and ultimately an up-leveling after a chaos process of our sense of self-value. What do we value? What's our ethos? And how do we value the self? That is all changing between now and when Uranus finally completes its process within the next 6-7 years. So this is a big process of reevaluation of self. What do we value, and indeed, how do we value the self? And how do we relate with all things that help us survive and thrive? How do we relate to everything about food systems, animal agribusiness, and land, earth, how we treat the planet, ecosystems, soil, all of that? But everything having to do with money, the financial system, etc., is changing, right? And so with that inconsistency, we have indeed a widow at an open grave, which is bringing forward the impermanence of material reality. Okay, so what do we have here? All natural compounds decay, said the Buddha. The most beautiful and most enjoyed substance loses its potential energy through continuous actualization, and the principle of integration and form is withdrawn, leaving the void, the open grave that ends all attachments. The void is the great challenge. What next? One must begin anew, and if possible, at a higher, i.e., more inclusive and universal and less egocentric level. This fifth conclusive stage of the sequence, which deals with root elements and basic actions and responses, may seem negative, yet it opens the door to self-renewal. Beyond the personal attachment rises the possibility of participating in a larger sphere of existence. This possibility rarely manifests itself except as one. Let me reread that. This possibility rarely manifests itself except as one ready to discard the past. Okay? This is about the up-leveling from the void of whatever might be changing in your material reality to the deeper connection of what is, and doing so in a way that's confident and, by the way, innovative. So not only do we have the innovative nature of Uranus opposing this new identity, this new deeper connected, this deepening of the connected, psychologically healthy individual, but we have it connecting both squares here, connecting to Varuna in Leo. So this is about creative, individuated innovation as the new self emerges, as the possessions and the material realities that we've come to know start to crumble and change. And I do believe that this is indeed a beautiful kind of entry point into what will become the 2020 cycle of shift and change. In the 2020 year, for those of you who have not had their analysis done, this is a massive time. This is a time of dramatic paradigm shifting, which is unlike any that we've gone through before. So with that being said, this is a brilliant month of growth, okay? Now, in addition to that, as I said before, we have this asteroid Lilith, this is Lilith 1181, at a 16-degree point in Scorpio. Now, 16 degrees is a karmic degree, everybody. And Lilith is the narrative of, I don't matter. I don't have value. What I do is not respected or honored. In fact, I'm ignored or even not seen, erased or abandoned. So with that all being said, there is a karmic process at play during the course of this new moon month, and indeed this new moon year, right? Because this is the year of this particular scorpionic growth cycle. That's what we're talking about here. So we have the month ahead that we're looking at, but indeed, this is a yearly process for this particular Scorpio new moon cycle. So with that being said, indeed, there's a karmic process of growth that is at hand simultaneously, that is intermeshed with the bigger narrative here of deeper psychological understanding, self-awareness, self-ownership, ownership of your own mind, your own psychology, your own stories, your own patterns, etc. More self-accountability and responsibility is indeed tied into the number 4. But the karmic aspect that's playing out is the kind of believing the myth of being not valued by the other. Okay, and when I say that, what I'm looking at here is Lilith and Scorpio. So through the power structures in your life, through the power structures that exist, the plutonic power structures that are currently transmutating, and we all know that Pluto is currently located in Capricorn. So what is transmutating globally are global systems, global politics, global governments, global financial systems, okay? Social systems, education systems, healthcare systems, everything is changing. That's part of Pluto's role in Capricorn, since it's been there since 2008. But with that being said, Pluto is driving this myth of I am not valuable. So indeed, we have this myth of I am not valuable in the same sign where the new moon is happening, the new psychological clarity and stability. And you can see that this karmic process of the myth of Pluto tells me, the powers that be tell me I'm not valuable, is linked by trying everybody to 16-degree Neptune, karmic Neptune. And where is Neptune? perfectly it's in the 8th house. Absolutely perfectly. And why is it perfect? Because the 8th house is aligned with Scorpio and Pluto in the natural zodiac wheel. So we have Scorpio trining Scorpio essentially here. We have Lilith trining a delusion, a psychological 8th house delusion, fantasy, Neptune, when it comes to worth, when it comes to value. And indeed, if we look at the 16-16 trine, we can see that there's these grand minor trines that are activated here. So the 16-degree Lilith, 16-degree Neptune are both sextiling the stellium. And of course, we have the stellium with Pluto and Saturn and the South Node in Capricorn. So what does this say, everybody? It says that there is a certain ability because of this harmonic trine. Now, again, there's two ways that this can show up. It depends on the individual. It depends on your level of growth and evolution and self-awareness. It depends on your willingness to grow and evolve. It depends on your blueprint. It depends on a lot. But how this can show up is that this trine, this easy harmonic relationship between psychological delusion, karmic, connected to a myth of others have power over me, I don't have power, is linked to the process of change and alteration happening with Capricornian systems globally and in your local neighborhood, in your local state, and in your local country. So the stuff that's changing in the social systems that are happening is activating or triggering in this month ahead the myth of they have power over me. And the belief in that process of belief, the belief in that process of disempowerment by the government, etc. Now, the other way that this is going to show up is that the Lilith Neptune is going to it's going to bring a skill set and a gift forward within the individual and hopefully within the collective, where there is an up-leveled creativity, also the function of Neptune, that is going to access or activate or catalyze the psychological underpinnings of the individual, that is connected to, and I should say, I need to say this before I finish, that this particular chart is a chart for Eastern US time frame. It's important to recognize that this house is going to be different for different places on the planet. So just know that. So I'm personally referring to the 8th house here, but indeed this can be another house in your particular area on the planet, wherever you live, all right? That being said, we still have the Lilith, Scorpio, Pluto narrative activated here, okay? So it's important that you recognize that what I'm speaking here actually can extend out to a generalized thing, especially if we're looking at Neptune as the function of creativity, which is what we're talking about now, or Neptune as the function of delusion and distraction and dissolution, okay? So here, if we're looking at this myth of Lilith, they have power over me, I don't have power, because of the power players out in society creating the rules, that this Neptune in Pisces, not even in the 8th house, right? If we're just talking about Neptune in Pisces for the general population out there, then this is about higher level spiritually accessed creativity that will feed the healing of this myth, and as it relates to the things at play that are transforming, the power structures that are collapsing, the patriarchy indeed that is part of this Capricornian narrative that is going through a radicalized, sustained, multi-year transformational process of destruction and death and transformation. Pluto, right? We have another 5-6 years of this. So there's massive change happening. Saturn has been forcing or pushing a couple of different narratives. One is the rigid attachment to old systems, especially in 2019, as Saturn has been conjunct the South Node. But now everybody, and very wonderfully, I think this is a very good thing. I think a lot of you are also going to think it's a good thing, is that currently if you look at the South Node with Saturn, there's a 5-degree orb between them now. These are officially separated. These are moving in different directions. Saturn is moving more toward Pluto, of course, because we have this January 12th exact conjunction at 22 degrees Capricorn that's coming up. But what we have here is the South Node continuing on its way clockwise. So these are separated now. And what this indicates is that the new manifestation and maturity, Saturn, is now able to bring forward the transformation, indeed, with the collapsing governments and societal systems that are not working, that are not sustainable, that are imbalanced, that are not based on natural law or natural systems, that now going forward, there's a new ability for that to push forward. Okay, this is very good. But what I want to say again with this is that the myth of devaluation because of the power players could be exacerbated by this harmonic trine to Neptune delusion. And simultaneously, or for others in the population, there could be an ability for deep, intuitive, and more spiritually connected knowing to release or dissolve or create dissolution with that myth. And indeed, because of this, minor grand trine to the stellium in Capricorn, indeed, I think a lot of people are going to be able to free themselves from any kind of imprisonment of that myth, the Lilith myth, in the face of all of the collapse that's going on in the world. Okay. Let's see what else we have here. We also have Jupiter at 22. Okay, of course, a master number here with 22. Jupiter at 22 in Sag squaring that Neptune. Again, we're still in that. This has been a long square. We've been in this square now for a very long time. And the square, which I don't think I'll go too much into, although it's significant, one thing to recognize about this square is that it's releasing. Jupiter is moving forward, and it's right now we're at a 6-degree orb here of this square. And the great thing is Jupiter is continuing to push forward, right? At the very beginning of December, it pops into Capricorn. So what that indicates is that very shortly here, I would say within the next week, this Jupiter will finally be out of square with Neptune. And I say finally because this square between illusion and truth, or the guru, or the teacher, or the philosophy, the belief system, that square has created a lot of extreme mind, a lot of delusional extreme thoughts. This is truth. God tells me this is truth, or whatever it is, right? But people's truth, they're clinging on to it. And indeed, we're in this 16-degree kind of karmic point of delusion that's happening right now, right? But the good thing is we are moving out. This square will finally release, and we have been in this for such a long time. Let's see what else we have. We have some quincunxes going on. Let's talk about the Lilith. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about all of the grand trines that we have going on here. Up here we have Chiron at 2 degrees Aries and Black Moon Lilith at 6 degrees Aries, trining that Varuna at 3 degrees and trining a couple of points here. We have Venus at 24 degrees Scorpio, Pallas Athena, importantly, at 25, conjunct Venus, and Mercury at 26 degrees. So these three, the asteroid and the 2 planets here, are in this grand trine configuration. This is harmonic feeding of information between these. Meaning this, that yes, there is the wounding with Black Moon Lilith of I am not valuable. What I do, Aries, who I am, Aries, my energy, my passions, my driver, my motivation, my actions, Aries, don't matter. That's what Lilith here is saying, okay? My actions, my behavior, my driver doesn't matter. Whatever I do, it doesn't matter, Okay. Now it's connected to Chiron, which is a bit of self-doubt. It's insecurity. It's also, ironically and paradoxically and perfectly, where we are a master teacher and healer, meaning each of us as individuals throughout the planet are stepping up into a new identity. And as we do that, Chiron is bringing forward self-doubt around that. Chiron, the wounded healer, has the vulnerability of the wounding which can't ever be healed. But the fact is that Chiron was a master teacher and healer. And indeed, that is, as we work through that vulnerability and self-doubt, we are growing ourselves into a new state of self. And indeed, what we have for this cycle, this Scorpio new moon month ahead, is Chiron conjunct Lilith. So there is going to be a lot of folks contending with, can I do it? Do I have the energy to go on? Does it even matter what I do? It's connected to Varuna, which is quite good, because Varuna in Leo, and of course we're talking not quite a grand fire trine. These are trining in fire signs, but this trine down here, of course, is in water. So because this trine is activated, but because it's not a grand fire trine, there is a bit of water energy, emotional energy that is dampening down the action set this month. Does that make sense? So with that being said, we have this kind of dealing with the thoughts that are coming up of self-doubt and does it even matter the efforts that I put into anything I'm doing? The good thing is, it is connected by trine to a fellow fire sign, Varuna in Leo. So this ability to kind of feel, yes, I am skilled, I am creative, I can do this. That's activated. And it's helping, it's aiding in self-doubt processes that might be activated. That being said, there's also a trine down here to Venus, Pallas Athena, and Mercury. Now let's talk about that. All of this is in Scorpio. So Pluto is ruling Venus, which is, of course, the feminine. It is feminine quality sets. But Venus is our sense of self-value, our value system, our ethic, our ethos. And Venus, of course, is abundance and indeed values as they are expressed via money, possessions, etc. So, and Venus, of course, is creativity. It's the arts, it's aesthetic, it's beauty. It's also love and sexuality. So issues of the feminine are coming up. Issues of value and beauty are coming up. Now, it's Venus in Scorpio, everybody, which is the intense feminine. It's the plutonic feminine. It's the empowered feminine. And this is exacerbated by the fact that Venus is conjunct Pallas Athena. This asteroid is indeed the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of war. This is the empowered feminine, which is conjunct Venus. And on top of both of those is Mercury. So where is the mind focused now as we step into a new psychological identity, psychologically stable? The interior wounds are able to be dealt with maturely, etc., as we step into a new identity of stabilization within. Okay? The mind, Mercury, is also scorpionic this month. During this process of this month ahead, Mercury is ruled by Pluto. Certainly today, certainly for this week, but indeed it's imbuing the narrative of growth for this month ahead. So Pluto is ruling the sun and the moon, Lilith, Venus, Pallas Athena, and Mercury. So where is Mercury naturally focused at this time? Psychological depths, unveiling secrets, okay? Getting to the root of corruption, getting to the root underneath what the mask presents. So this is about getting down into the dark underbelly. That's where the mind is focused at this time of shifting conditions, right? So the confident, individuated person is dealing with the shifting conditions in a stable way, and indeed the stable identity of the detective, the truth teller, you know, the one that can psychically see beyond the veils, which is all Scorpio. The Scorpio identity within each of us is activated. Okay. Now, with that all being said, the ethic, the power, and the focused mind, Plutonic power, Plutonic value system, all of this is bringing forward energetics with confidence, and also energetics, I think, with dealing with the insecurities that might be emerging. So this is aiding any kind of insecurities that are coming forward. Okay. Now, the other thing that I'll state here is that the Sun and Moon conjunction also has a quincunx. This green line here is quincunxing both Chiron and Black Moon Lilith. So indeed, there is a bit of instability. The quincunx relationship is naturally a dissonant relationship between the planetary bodies. So as the new identity of psychological depth and clarity, and indeed inner stability, stabilization of the inner past emotional wounded stories and patterns, as that comes forward, there is a bit of dissonance as we navigate a bit of insecurity and self-doubt, and indeed feeling like, oh my gosh, does it even matter what I do or what I say? Okay? Just understand, if those are some of the thoughts coming up for you over the course of this month, it's natural for this process. So just be with it, investigate it for yourself, do self-inquiry, and of course, all of you can be in contact with me to understand, number one, your own blueprint, right? To get an in-depth natal analysis to understand the depths of your story, your patterning, and what the growth arcs and the mastery trajectories are, but also to work on the processes at hand for you now, and indeed in the coming 2020 cycle, to really get to the root and understand what is activated, why it's activated, and where you're going. Okay, so the links are below this video for those interested. Let's see. There is something else, okay? Now, if we look at that Venus, that Pallas Athena, and that Mercury in Scorpio, all of those are opposing Sedna. Sedna at 27 degrees Taurus. Sedna, of course, is the myth of betrayal and indeed ultimately death. So a betrayal that had created a death of the physical body. And indeed, wherever we hold Sedna shows us where we inherently are holding an energetic of total distrust. And where we ultimately, underneath everything, we actually fear for our life. So there's a clinging energy that can happen with the Sedna point. The myth of Sedna, for those who, I don't think I've shared this yet on the public channel, but for those interested to know, it is absolutely key to understand where your Sedna is in your natal chart. Absolutely essential, because it helps you understand some key patterning and some wound stuff that is absolutely profound, right? There's different wound points that we're looking at, the Lilith, the Chiron, the other Lilith here. But the Sedna is kind of a key point that we always want to attend to. And indeed, over the course of the Scorpio new moon month ahead, Sedna is opposing this energetic signature of our value system, our power, and our focus. And indeed, what we speak. So women that come forward and speak, oh boy, there's an energetic at play where there would be pushback, meaning that there is a power coming forward. I think a lot of women are coming forward. I think a lot of people are coming forward that want to express their power in a way creatively and powerfully, in a transformational way, Scorpio, that might create pushback. And indeed, there could be some fear of betrayal or fear of loss of income or money or even your jobs and work in some cases. For some of you listening to my voice, you're going to understand what's happening this month, because as you step into your power, especially, let's say, women, like for example, in the news cycle in the month ahead, there's no question that I believe we're going to see more and more women coming forward, making accusations against men in power. And that's going to have blowback. It's going to have pushback. But it's part of the narrative of the emergence of plutonic transformation that needs to be communicated. Stuff that does, secrets that do, whistleblowers that do need to come forward. That's what's activated now. This is a time to unveil. This is very heavily scorpionic here with all this energy in Scorpio, but a lot of opposition to this Sedna energy. So the myth of Sedna is, you know, a young woman, maybe 18, 19 years old, was arranged to be married by her father, and she didn't want to be married. So she said no. And the father ended up taking the daughter out on a lake and pushed her over the side of the canoe to drown her. But when she attempted to crawl back into the canoe, he cut off her fingers. And so she dropped to the bottom of the lake and drowned. There's different iterations of that myth, but that gives you the generalized storyline and indeed the intensity of it. Because what we're talking about with the Sedna energy is not only was her voice denied, not only was her position and her opinion devalued, but she was betrayed by a family member, her father, who, you know, in her mind was supposed to love her unconditionally. Not only did he betray her, but ultimately he took her life. He killed her. So this is the ultimate of betrayal. It's the ultimate of level of distrust, leading to actually a key area of fear. And everybody, when we're looking at Sedna at this particular position at the end of Taurus, what we're looking at here is a betrayal of our possessions, a betrayal of our finances, our money, a betrayal indeed of our survival, a betrayal of our ability to meet our own basic essential needs. And so there's fear coming up for a lot of people over this time frame. Do I speak my power, or is it going to impact my survival, my ability to take care of myself? So think about that and drink it in and work with the energies this month, because ultimately this is a month of emerging into a new sense of stability, confidence, clarity, and truth-telling. A lot is here. Karmically, there is potential here to dissolve the myth of they have power over me, quote unquote they, whoever they is for you, okay? So it's very important to realize that there's a lot activated and there's a ton of potential for this month, all right? So I think I'm going to leave it there. This video went much longer than I intended it to. I send all of you much love and support for your month ahead. For those interested in learning about your blueprint and going quite deep, you can be in touch, all right? And you can, again, find the links below. I will have the alchemy scopes up this month with your art renderings. That will get up hopefully by the 1st of November. So this week, I'm going to start to upload those. For those of you with any questions in the meantime, though, you can be in contact. All right, everybody. Much love. Bye-bye.